Sure.
But Adam, couldn't you acknowledge, like, and I'm not trying to take a shot at you here, you failed out of being a stand-up. Well, you failed out of stand-up comedy, and Pete Davidson became a multi-millionaire famous success from it. So maybe you're not in a position to determine whether it's good comedy or not.
Okay, so before we get into this, I need you to understand something. What you're about to watch is not just a debate about comedy. This is actually one of the most awkward moments of self-destruction I've ever seen happen live on television. Because Adam Sosnick walks into this conversation acting like the ultimate authority on what is and isn't funny. He's got his credentials ready, he's got his stories ready, he's completely confident. And then Dave Smith does something so simple, so clean, so devastatingly logical that the whole thing falls apart in real time. And the best part, Adam doesn't even realize it's happening until it's already too late. Watch very carefully because you're going to see the exact moment everything flips.
Tony reminds me of Charlie Kirk, in that he's definitely been on camera letting a guy unload in his throat.
So there will be a lot of people who will have found that crossed a line, that it was too offensive, that it's too soon after Charlie's murder. And you've got to think of his wife, his widow, his family, his kids, people around him who would have probably found that horrendous. When you heard that joke from Peter, which got a mixed response, but when you heard that, did you feel that crossed a line?
Well, listen, Piers, I did stand-up comedy in my 20s, and I decided to end up focus on making money, and that's how I met PBD in the finance world, and we started the podcast together in 2020. But I know funny. What happened with me personally, and I'll get to Charlie Kirk because I knew Charlie Kirk very well, is I said, rather than being a stand-up comedian and sleeping on friends' couches, let me make some money. 10 years later, I made a bunch of money. I owned a stand-up comedy club, and I hired comedians. In fact, the biggest star on SNL, I found him when he was 19, Marcelo Hernandez, who has the #1 show on Netflix right now. He actually worked for myself and PBD at Valuetainment. So I know funny. I'm sitting in a van down by the river right now, sweating my tush off right here. I'll shout out to Chris Farley. I've been around funny people. In fact, you know Vinny Oshana, who's on your show, one of the funniest, greatest people, who's about to cross 1 million in comedy. He's incredible. But there's also people who make their name in this career by not being that funny. Pete Davidson is one of them. Jimmy Kimmel is one of them. I'm not going to go there and say Dave Smith is one of them. That's not what I'm going to do. But the reality is Charlie Kirk was an absolute hero. And what's happening with him, people are literally taking their proverbial shots at him. The bottom line is this. Pete Davidson, name one famous joke he's ever made. I can tell you jokes that Dave Chappelle made, that George Carlin made, that every single comedian had famously made, Chris Rock, right? Bring me the big piece of chicken. What has Pete Davidson ever done that's been funny? In fact, when your dating career is more in the headlines than your comedy career, you're probably not that funny. So it's just par for the course. But the bottom line is this. We need to stop being so offended in this country and realize that free societies love comedians. And that's where we are.
Right, but so you end with a little stinger at the end because it looked like you were going down a path of saying you thought Pete Davidson crossed a line. So do you think he crossed a line? And should Netflix have aired that joke?
I don't think there's any line you can cross. The market will speak. If Pete Davidson wants to start doing stand-up comedy shows again and nobody shows up, let the market speak. I believe in free market capitalism. I don't believe in censorship. I don't believe in cancel culture, even if you're unfunny. If we were canceling unfunny people, there's a lot of comedians that would have been canceled years ago, Pete Davidson being one of them. So there's no line to cross.
Okay. And Dave, I didn't get a chance to specifically ask you about it. So just very quickly, what did you think of that joke?
It was hilarious. It was a great joke. I don't even understand entertaining this conversation of whether it crossed the line. And as you pointed out, Piers, right? It just shows everybody's hypocrisy immediately because the people who are outraged about the George Floyd joke aren't outraged about the Charlie Kirk joke and vice versa. It's a roast. It's edgy comedy. And if you don't like it, then don't watch it. It's really that simple. And, look, I'm friends with Pete, or I was friends with Pete when we were coming up in comedy together. And again, Adam can have whatever opinion he wants on who he thinks is funny and who isn't funny. The bottom line is that millions of people love Pete Davidson. And if he does go on a stand-up tour, he'll be selling out giant theaters. So if you don't like it, that's fine.
And
that was a hilarious joke.
He also does a lot of these roasts, and he regularly has awful jokes told about his father who died on 9/11, and he laughs and accepts.
That's true.
Right, but Piers, but it's all about, obviously, right, with comedy, it's all about the intention, right? the intention of anyone doing comedy is to try to get everyone in the room to crack up laughing.
Right.
That's the goal. Pete does it. The goal when Pete tells that joke isn't like to get people to walk out. It's to kill to make it as edgy as possible and still hit you with a big punchline. And that's it. That's the way comedy works. It's a discussion between the comic and the audience.
Well, I'll say that joke was
that
the reason that we're having this discussion right now is because the joke was actually, in my opinion, Dave, you're entitled to yours, not funny. It was completely offensive. Gay Tony Hinchcliffe sexual reference to the throat.
But Adam, couldn't you acknowledge, and I'm not trying to take a shot at you here, you failed out of being a stand-up. Well, you failed out of stand-up comedy, and Pete Davidson became a multi-millionaire famous success from it. So maybe you're not in a position to determine whether it's good comedy or not.
Okay, pause. Did you catch what just happened there? Because most people watching this completely miss it. Adam spent the first 2 minutes of this debate building himself up as the guy who knows comedy, owned a club, hired hundreds of comedians, discovered SNL stars. He basically turned his entire introduction into one long argument for why his opinion on comedy is the only one that matters. And then Dave Smith comes back with literally 7 words that burn the whole thing down. He points out that Adam quit stand-up and Pete Davidson became a multi-millionaire from it. That's it. That's the whole argument. And suddenly, all those credentials Adam was listing don't sound like authority anymore. They sound like someone trying really hard to convince you they're not bitter. Watch how Adam reacts after this moment. His energy completely changes. He starts saying, let me speak, and getting flustered. That's not what a confident person does. That's what someone does when they've just been hit with something they weren't prepared for and they know it landed.
No, the fact that I owned a comedy club and I hired hundreds of comedians gives me the credibility to say,
my God.
I know what's funny and not funny.
There is no
because
opinion.
I've seen people who sell out
Let me just tell you
crowds.
this.
Dave, listen, let
As
me
a
speak. Dave,
stand-up
let me
comic,
speak. You just spoke.
there's no one's
Relax.
opinion.
Relax, Dave. Let me at least
there-
speak. Okay, are you gonna let me speak or no?
I'm pretty relaxed.
You started
The
so
reality is that
well,
we're
you
doing-
two.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. The reality is this. The reason we're doing this show right now, because it really wasn't that funny. What's the funniest joke Pete Davidson has ever said other than that joke? Dave Smith, comedian.
I know a ton of Pete
Exactly.
Davidson
He's
jokes,
never
dude.
told
I
a
did
funny
stand-up
joke.
with
All
him.
right,
Go
let me
ahead,
bring in
What?
Emily
Adam,
Wilson.
you
Emily,
really
welcome
are
back
like
to
one of the dumbest people who talks for a living.
Let me bring Emily back in.
Go ahead,
welcome you back to the show. Emily, what did you think of that joke? Because the George Floyd joke, which Dave referenced, was this was Tony Hinchcliffe, who said, the black community is so proud of you to Kevin Hart. Right now, George Floyd is looking up at us all, laughing so hard he can't breathe. And again, there were gasps, and then some people were laughing, some were clapping. Did you find that joke funny?
Well, yeah, Piers, I can't be a hypocrite. If you recall, you were very upset about my joke about George Floyd that I had made previously. So, yeah, I do think it's funny. I also don't put George Floyd and Charlie Kirk in the same category. I thought the entire special was really good. I thought it was really funny. The only problem is I just didn't think that joke about Charlie Kirk was funny. I think he could have took that joke, used anyone else in a different scenario, and I think it would have been more funny.
Did he cross a line then for you?
Comparing a line that is supposed to be crossed, it's comedy. Do I think it's inappropriate? Yeah. Do I think it was uncalled for? Yeah. Do I think he could have done a better job? I don't think he's funny, and I don't think the joke was funny. You're comparing a guy who has children that are going to grow up and see these things, whose throat got shot out, traumatizing millions of people around the world, to, like, I'm sorry, what's the politically correct statement, blowing loads in the guy's throat? Those two things have nothing in common. It makes no sense, and I don't think it's funny.
Should
I want to point out.
Okay, but should Netflix? Look, you're perfectly entitled to find it funny or not. And as Dave said, there were lots of people that were cracking up, and there'll be other people who were outraged. But a lot of people felt Netflix shouldn't have aired the Charlie Kirk joke or the George Floyd one.
Netflix should 100% air it.
Okay.
The irony of Netflix is how woke and sensitive they are. So for them to ironically choose to air the one thing that targeted the most loved conservative is such bullshit. I'm sorry. That's the hypocrisy of it all. I mean, obviously you have Ted Sarandos, who is a huge liberal, but I'm like, these are the same groups of people that were supportive of canceling Kevin Hart, that were also supportive of canceling Tony Hinchcliffe, but when it's aimed at a conservative, all of a sudden the rules go out the window.
I mean, it is interesting. I do remember Tony Hinchcliffe when he gave that speech at the rally for Trump just before the election, outrage over some of the jokes he made then and calls for him to be cancelled and so on. And they would be by a lot of people who would consider themselves woke left, who have been oddly a little bit quiet about what Netflix have done here. Let me bring in Jay Dyer. Welcome to Uncensored, Jay. What did you feel about not just the Charlie Kirk joke, but also the George Floyd one, those two in particular?
Well, my first inclination was to feel that it was inappropriate. However, I remember the last time I was doing a stand-up event in LA, I made the joke that we know what happened to the magic bullet in the case of JFK because it went into the throat of RFK. So I feel like that joke, which went silent to the entire audience. Thank you. That was silent for the whole. The audience didn't think it was funny, but then I realized inappropriateness is actually the part that makes comedy funny. So while it may be inappropriate, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be aired. And I'll have you know, Piers, the last time I was on, we were disagreeing about a certain word that starts with the letter N. And I'll have you know, the black community has given me 23 N-word passes, and I have chosen, out of respect for you, to not use them on your show.
Well, that would be entirely a matter for you.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. People can behave how they want on the show.
Didn't the market, hold on. So in the case of what you said about the PBD guy, didn't the market speak in the case of Pete Davidson? You said, let the market speak. Didn't it speak?
Well, actually, to be honest, Jay Dyer raises an interesting point. Dave says that we bring you back in here. If he decided to tell a joke right now, Jay Dyer, including the M word repeatedly, would you feel that crosses a line?
No, personally, no, I don't. If you're talking about a joke, if the intention is to be funny, then I think he's trying to make people laugh. And again, people can have whatever feelings they want to about this. But can I just point this out? Because this is a very, I've made this point a lot through the years of wokeism. But Piers, imagine, let's say, because I grew up in Brooklyn in the 80s and 90s, and I've been in a few project buildings in my day, and I don't know if anyone's ever hung with black people in the hood, but you wouldn't really characterize them as being sensitive. You know, that's not really the way. It's always white.
Dave, straight from the hood right here,
liberals.
Dave, okay?
It's kind of like white liberals in defense of black people will get very offended by this stuff. Just for example, let's say I had a really offensive joke, okay? Like a really edgy joke. And I were to go tell it on a job site, and I were to go tell it on a job site, and then I were to go tell it at an Ivy League university. Where do you think I would draw more outrage? We all know it's at the Ivy League university. See, the thing is that people who have been through some fucked up shit tend to laugh at some fucked up jokes. And people who haven't been through that are like, what are you doing? I'm offended on behalf of these people. A lot of comedy is like a coping mechanism with the tragedy of life. And this is the way we do it. We try to laugh at that. My grandfather was a Jew who escaped Nazi Germany, and he loved Holocaust jokes. Life is complicated, man. And it's just, I don't.
Those are the best jokes, Dave. You're the best at that.
Okay, Adam, what are you trying to do here, buddy? What are you trying to do?
I'm just saying those are good jokes. You're good at the Holocaust jokes.
Anyway.
And that right there is why this debate is so fascinating to watch. Adam came onto this show with one goal: establish himself as the credible voice in the room and use that credibility to dismiss Pete Davidson completely. And for a few minutes, it was actually working. But Dave Smith understood something really important. You don't win a debate by out-talking someone. You win by finding the one thing that makes their whole argument contradict itself. And Adam handed it to him on a silver platter the moment he started listing all the reasons he walked away from comedy. Because you cannot spend 2 minutes explaining why you chose money over stand-up and then turn around and tell a guy who chose stand-up and made millions from it that he isn't funny. The audience felt it, Piers felt it, and deep down even Adam felt it. That uncomfortable pause after Dave's comments said everything. Let me know in the comments who you think actually won this debate. And if you want to see more moments like this where someone walks into a debate thinking they're untouchable and walks out completely differently, make sure you subscribe, because we find these moments so you don't have to.